Hi, today I'd like to just talk a little wee bit about a psychological defensive mechanism called deflection. And if you are in a relationship with a narcissist and you have engaged in conflict in any way, you've probably experienced them using this deflection technique. Or if you watch the news today and see some of the responses to questions by politicians and all of that, you see deflection happening constantly. And so it's basically a psychological defense mechanism where the person being confronted shifts the focus away from themselves. So you think of, I grew up in Canada with hockey, we talk about it taking a shot and then deflecting it. You send it in a different direction. And so this person is saying, you're confronting me. This is uncomfortable. I don't want the focus on me. So look over here. Let's get the spotlight over here and off of me. So it's a way of avoiding an honest look at yourself, uncomfortable thoughts, uncomfortable feelings, and getting the focus somewhere else. And so that, sadly, is something that is happening a lot, and it never leads to anything good. It might get the person off the hook for a minute, but eventually it just makes things worse and worse. So let me just say up front that any relationship to be healthy, any person to be healthy, you have to begin by looking honestly at the situation, by seeing it accurately. You can't fix a wound, a disease, until you see it accurately. As long as you're looking at the wrong thing, as long as you're being focused on the wrong thing, or seeing a distortion of what's actually happening, you're never going to be able to get to the true issues and fix the issue. So deflection is a very childlike thing to avoid the real issue and avoid culpability and actually fixing the real problem. And so it only makes things worse in time. So let me just give you some examples just so you can kind of see clearly how this works out. So if you look at a personal relationship and somebody called you and asked you to call them back, and for whatever reason you didn't want to, you were afraid to, so you don't do it. And so now they go, why didn't you call me back? And so instead of saying, well, here's honestly what's happened and why I didn't, you go, why are you always so controlling? That's a deflection. That's getting the focus off of you onto them as if they're the bad guy. Or if you're in the workplace and you didn't send in your report on time for whatever reasons and your boss says your report's late. And instead of you saying, sorry, here's why, and owning it and taking the consequences, you go, well, have you seen how late Sarah's reports are? That's a deflection. Or like we said in politics or the media, a politician is confronted about something, let's say corruption, and they deflect and go, well, yeah, look at the other party, look at how bad they are, instead of actually talking about the real issue. So when you look at deflection, there's three kind of key features. So number one, the person's avoiding responsibility. They do not want to own their actions, their part, so they shift attention elsewhere. And so that's the second thing. There's always a distraction tactic to get you from looking at the real issues. They get you looking somewhere else. They create distractions. And that leads to the third piece. In order for them to not look at themselves, they have to externalize. So they got to move the discussion from them personally to something else being the issue. So a person, the environment, some abstract thing, they have to have something external to blame to get you to focus on. So why do people use it? So to me, it boils down to shame or guilt. So shame is that deep core belief that I'm not good enough. Anybody who gets to know me is going to reject me, look down on me, judge me. So I can never let people see the real me. So I can never own my stuff, admit weakness, admit fault, because then people will judge me. So shame just has this core belief that I must hide. I must keep up a smokescreen, a camouflage, an image so that people never see the true me. And if they start getting close, I better start deflecting. And then guilt is, I've actually done something wrong and I don't want to own it, because then there's going to be consequences. I might get punished. Things might go really bad for me. So I have to keep deflecting attention away from what I've done wrong. And so what you can see is both shame and guilt create a lot of anxiety, very unpleasant emotions inside of a person. And so now it's not just that I don't want others to look honestly at me, is I can't even look honestly at myself. I can't have any honest introspection, because then I might have to get honest with myself about what really is going on in my deeper issues. So I deflect from me and looking at myself, and now I must get others to deflect from looking at me honestly. And then for some people with shame and guilt, especially shame, there's a real fear of conflict. So conflict is, it's going to expose me as wrong. It's going to make me look bad. Somebody's going to be upset with me and not like me. So I must avoid conflict at all costs. Comes out of this a codependency mindset. And so what then happens, as soon as there's potential conflict, I got to deflect to something else in order to avoid conflict, because conflict only leads to bad things. So it must be avoided at all costs. And so deflection can get used there. So let me give you 20 some different ways that people deflect. So number one, blame shifting. Instead of accepting responsibility, they blame somebody else. They turn it often back on the person that is accusing them. So let's say your partner says, you hurt my feelings when you said that. And probably you did. Maybe you were disrespectful. Maybe you were very inappropriate. But instead of owning it, you go, oh, you're just too sensitive. Or you blame something else. So blame shifting. Then whataboutism is the second one. And that's kind of creating the distraction. So people are zeroing in on the real issues. They're starting to see it clearly, but then it makes you culpable. It makes you guilty. It exposes you. So you create a distraction over here and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? To try to get them from zeroing in on the real issues. So that is so common. A third thing is to minimize. And so people are zeroing in on the real issue, but then you go, yeah, but it's not a big deal. So you minimize the real issue. Again, you're distorting it so they don't see it accurately. So if your partner says to you, I felt really ignored by you at the party, and it's true because you did ignore them the whole party, then you go, come on, it wasn't that big a deal. A fourth is you respond to accusations. So there's zeroing in. You respond with sarcasm. You respond with ridicule, with humor. And so there's an element here where you can just turn it into a joke and try to be funny. And that kind of gets people from being so serious about the real issue. Or there's an element of cruelty. You take a shot at them, sometimes couched in humor, or there's just a meanness that can happen to try to defeat them from pursuing their line of inquiry. Another common one is to then play the victim. So people are zeroing in on the real issue, and all of a sudden you go, you're always attacking me. I can't help it. I got handed this. This is the way I am. And they just play the victim as if it's not my fault. Now you're the bad guy for trying to make me guilty, and they go to this victim status. So what you'll find with a narcissist who acts so strong and so powerful is that they always end up playing the victim when they are in trouble, as if it's not their fault, somebody else's fault. They're just the victim of a system. They're just the victim of other people's choices, but they will never own their own responsibility. Then some go to deflection by intellectualizing everything. So somebody says to their partner, I just need you to be more supportive at a party. And they go, support is a subjective concept that varies across cultural paradigms. And now they go into this intellectualing what support means, and it can be different in different cultures, blah, 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 and totally deflect away from the point the person is trying to make. I just need you to give me some support at a party. Then, sadly, such a common part of deflection is gaslighting. So the person says, you did this. You yelled at me yesterday. And they go, I did not. That never happened. You're just making it up. They get you to start to question or doubt your own perception or your own thinking. And so gaslighting becomes a common thing that people do in positions of authority. When others are zeroing in to expose them, they start gaslighting and saying, that didn't happen, and you're just making that up. Some go to just changing the subject. So you're zeroing in on the real issue, and they go, hey, did you see the game last night? And again, they're just jumping to a different topic and wanting to talk about that, and it's just all of a sudden you're just shut down. They're not going to pursue this anymore. They're not going to talk about it anymore. They're only going to talk about this topic over here. Some go to overgeneralization, vagueness. Some call it a word salad. You're zeroing in on a specific, and now they just start talking and filling in the space with words and generalizations and vagueness that really doesn't say anything. It doesn't really respond to anything. It just throws you a whole bunch of vague information as if that's a good answer. But it's just nothing. It's just empty. Others just go to, you say, you didn't take out the trash today like you said you would. And so instead of owning that, they go to all statements. You always blame me for everything. You make everything my fault. You never give me any credit. So all of a sudden there's this overgeneralization that you say I did one thing wrong, that means you're saying I did everything wrong. That's a common deflection as well. And then we've kind of referred to this, but it's the counterattack. So you're zeroing in, and they see it as an attack. You're about to expose me. You're about to show what I've done wrong, my flaws. So I'm going to go to fight mode. I am going to now discredit you as a person. I'm now going to be cruel to you. I'm now going to tear you to shreds. I'm now going to make you look as bad as I can. I'm going to look for one flaw in you or in what you've said to totally discredit everything that you said. So if you come with this carefully reasoned argument with evidence, etc., if they can find one little thing wrong in what you said, to them that discredits everything in your argument. Or if you have one little thing you didn't do right this week, then that, therefore, if I can discredit the messenger, I can discredit the message. And then very quickly, some common ones are exaggeration and hyperbole. So you are zeroing in, and then they just exaggerate everything and make it totally unreasonable. Or they just repeat kind of indoctrination catchphrases as their word salad, trying to get away from the issues to let's get to the catchphrases. Or they provide false evidence. They make up stuff to try to disprove you. Or they just talk about past achievements. So they're not going to focus on the issue. They're just going to say, here's what I did in the past. So that means I'm a great guy. Then they can just outright lie, deny. That's very common. Make all kinds of excuses. Or some even go to fatalism. Oh, I just can't help it. That's just the way I am. Deal with it. So they're not even going to say, I made choices. It's almost like fate made me this way. Fate decided these decisions. Blame fate, don't blame me. And then some just refuse to talk about it. Nope, not going to talk about it, and shut down the conversation. And that can happen often in a relationship with a narcissist. You want to resolve issues in the relationship. You want to talk about them. You want to figure out how to resolve them. They refuse to. And they stonewall you constantly whenever you try. And then some, they look for allies. So you're zeroing in on the issue and they go, well, so-and-so does it, so they're a pretty important person, so it must be okay. Or, you know what, everybody's doing this, so why are you picking on me? Or they go, you know what, I heard a psychologist on the internet say that this was good behavior to do this, so must be all right because there's an official person that says this is all right. So they're gathering support for what they're doing, even though it violates love, even though it's hurting you and others. And then some will go to a very tricky form of deflection, and they'll acknowledge it intellectually, but they won't change. So they'll say, yeah, you're right, I ignored you at the party, but blah, blah, blah. And so it looks like they're acknowledging it, but they're not really acknowledging it. And then another common one is to misrepresent what you say. So you point out something that they did that hurt one of the children. And instead of owning it, they go, you're saying I'm a terrible parent. No, you're not. But if they can misrepresent what you're saying, then they can create a straw man that they can then attack. I am not a terrible parent. Look at all the good things I did. And now they've deflected from the real issue. And then the final one is projection. And that is the stuff they know they're guilty of, they actually blame you for. So you're insensitive to me. You're a narcissist. You're not meeting my needs. Even though they know they're the narcissist, they're not meeting your needs. All of that. They just project onto you the very things they know are true about themselves. So that's projection. And it never brings about anything healthy. It actually always makes things worse, makes things more unhealthy, destroys relationship, destroys countries. Health only comes when we see things accurately. And so what then is needed to do that? You gotta heal shame. You gotta have true humility that says all that stuff about me believing I'm not good enough or feeling it deep down, that was lies given to me in childhood. Yes, I make some mistakes, but I have value. And I can own my mistakes without that threatening who I am. And so I humbly embrace that I have value. I'm just as valuable as anybody else, but I make mistakes and I need to own those. And I need to see situations accurately if they're ever going to bring any healing and health. That is so important. Heal the shame, and that takes a true humility. Thank you. Have a great day.